The universe, in its infinite and often bewildering wisdom, has a penchant for crafting scenarios that defy all logic and social convention. My particular cosmic jest involved the two most significant women in my life, my girlfriend, Maya, and my ex-girlfriend, Clara, becoming joined at the hip, a veritable two-headed hydra of my romantic past and present. And what they unearthed together in the dusty catacombs of my past left them utterly speechless and, for a terrifying 48 hours, almost left me a man with no girlfriend at all. It began, as most modern fables do, with an artisanal pottery class. Maya, my girlfriend of a year, a woman whose spirit was as vibrant and untamed as the abstract canvases she painted, had signed up on a whim. She believed in the therapeutic properties of clay, in the grounding nature of creating something with one's hands. Clara, my ex of 2 years, a woman whose mind was as sharp and structured as the legal briefs she authored, had also, through some bizarre alignment of the stars, decided to seek solace in ceramics. Their initial meeting, as they later recounted with much mirth, was a comedy of manners. They were the only two in the class who seemed to find more clay on themselves than on their respective wheels. A shared grimace over a lopsided pot morphed into a conspiratorial giggle, and by the end of the second class, they were sharing a bottle of wine at a nearby bar, blissfully unaware of the common denominator in their romantic lives: me, Alex. The revelation, when it came, was apparently undramatic. I was the subject of a casual, "So, are you seeing anyone?" from Clara. Maya's description of her architect boyfriend, who had a ridiculous obsession with vintage sci-fi novels and a peculiar aversion to cilantro, was met with a slowly dawning, horrified recognition on Clara's face. The ensuing conversation, I'm told, was a masterclass in diplomacy and shared disbelief. But instead of the expected animosity, a strange and powerful alliance was forged. They were, they decided, uniquely positioned to understand the enigma that was Alex. Their friendship blossomed with an unnerving speed. There were brunches I wasn't invited to, inside jokes I wasn't privy to, and a shared language of knowing glances over my head at social gatherings. I was, I must admit, unnerved. It was like having the two lead detectives from different precincts of my life team up to solve the case of what's wrong with Alex. My every flaw, every quirky habit, every mumbled phrase in my sleep was now subject to a two-woman panel discussion. "You know," Maya would say, a thoughtful glint in her eye, "you have this weird habit of humming when you're concentrating. It's always the same tune." And Clara would chime in, a smirk playing on her lips, "The theme from Battlestar Galactica, the original series. He's done it since college." I was living in a surreal, self-inflicted episode of This Is Your Life, narrated by the ghosts of girlfriends past and present. The fateful day arrived cloaked in the mundane. I was away for the weekend on a work trip, a site visit to a new project. Maya, who had a key to my apartment, had decided to host a girls' night-in with Clara. Their mission, initially, was innocent enough: to conquer the notoriously difficult 3-day marathon version of a board game I owned, a game so complex it had been gathering dust in the back of my hall closet for years. It was in their quest for the board game that they stumbled upon it. Tucked away behind a stack of old university textbooks and a box of defunct electronic gadgets was another box, unmarked and sealed with a formidable layer of packing tape. It was a Pandora's box of my own making, a vessel containing a past I had meticulously and consciously buried. Later, Maya described a moment to me. The air in the closet was thick with the scent of aging paper and forgotten things. Clara, ever the pragmatist, had located a pair of scissors and slit the tape with surgical precision. They lifted the lid, and the first thing they saw was a riot of sequins. Puzzled, they delved deeper. Out came a pair of shockingly tight black trousers with a red satin stripe down the side. Then a billowy, flamboyant shirt, unbuttoned to a daring degree in the accompanying photograph. And then the medals. Dozens of them, heavy and ornate, engraved with phrases like regional champions and national finalists. But it was the scrapbook that truly sent them down the rabbit hole. It was a meticulously curated chronicle of a life I had never spoken of. There I was, a younger, scrawnier Alex, my face a mask of intense concentration, my hair slicked back with an alarming amount of gel. In every photo, I was locked in a dramatic embrace with a petite, equally sequent young woman. We were frozen in moments of impossible dips, gravity-defying lifts, and passionate, almost kisses that were part of a choreographed routine. The captions in my mother's elegant cursive read, "Alex and Bianca, tango champions," the paso doble that brought the house down, and, most damningly, Lex the Torpedo and his firecracker. Speechless, they stared at the images. This was not the Alex they knew, the quiet architect who considered a night of intense sci-fi reading a wild time. This was a different creature entirely, a peacock in human form, a whirlwind of theatrical passion and shimmering fabric. The final piece of evidence, the smoking gun, was a DVD at the bottom of the box. It was simply labeled Nationals 2008. With a sense of mounting disbelief, they slid the disc into my DVD player. The screen flickered to life, and there I was in glorious low-resolution video. The announcer's voice, tinny and overly enthusiastic, boomed, "And now, returning to the floor, the couple that has set this competition on fire, the incomparable Lex the Torpedo and his fiery partner Bianca." And then I danced. It was, by all accounts, a sight to behold. My hips moved with a fluidity that bordered on the supernatural. My legs, a blur of motion, commanded the dance floor. I was a tempest of controlled energy, a story in motion. I was, for 3.5 minutes of pure, unadulterated Latin ballroom dancing, magnificent. When the music faded and my on-screen self struck a final dramatic pose, a collective "wow" escaped Maya's lips. Clara, for her part, was apparently in a state of shock, her mouth slightly agape. And then the silence was shattered by a peal of laughter so loud, so unrestrained, that Maya later said she was worried my neighbors would complain. When I returned home the next evening, blissfully unaware of the seismic shift that had occurred in my absence, I was greeted by an unusual sight. Maya and Clara were sitting on my sofa, a bottle of wine half empty between them, and an expression of serene, knowing amusement on their faces. The television was on, and on the screen, a ridiculously dressed teenager was in the middle of a cha-cha. My blood ran cold. "Lex the Torpedo," Maya said, her voice laced with an almost cruel level of amusement. "We have so much to talk about." The ensuing conversation was one of the most excruciating of my life. I was mortified, my carefully constructed persona of a serious, grounded adult shattered into a million glittering sequined pieces. I tried to explain, to downplay the whole thing. It was a phase, a youthful indiscretion, a brief, bizarre detour on the road to my actual life. My blood ran cold. "Lex the Torpedo," Maya said, her voice laced with an almost cruel level of amusement. "We have so much to talk about." The ensuing conversation was one of the most excruciating of my life. I was mortified, my carefully constructed persona of a serious, grounded adult shattered into a million glittering sequined pieces. I tried to explain, to downplay the whole thing. It was a phase, a youthful indiscretion, a brief, bizarre detour on the road to my actual life. But Maya wasn't laughing anymore. "Alex, it's not about the dancing," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The dancing is, well, it's actually pretty amazing. But you hid this. You hid a whole part of who you are, a part that was clearly so important to you. What else are you hiding?" Her words hit me harder than any of the laughter. She was right. It wasn't the secret itself that was the problem. It was the fact that I had kept it. I had walled off a piece of my history, deeming it too embarrassing, too uncool to share. And in doing so, I had presented her with an incomplete version of myself. Clara, ever the lawyer, provided a surprisingly insightful closing argument. "He's always done this," she said, not unkindly. "He compartmentalizes. He has his work life, his home life, apparently, his secret Latin dancing life. He doesn't like the streams to cross." For 2 days, Maya was distant. She needed time to process, to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the sequin dynamo on the DVD. It was the almost left me single phase of this bizarre saga. I was adrift in a sea of my own making, my past having finally caught up with me in the most unexpected of ways. The resolution came not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet conversation. I finally opened up, truly opened up for the first time. I told them about the immense pressure from my parents, the hours of grueling practice, the teasing I had endured at school for my unusual hobby. I told them how, when I went to university, I had made a conscious decision to leave Lex the Torpedo behind, to reinvent myself as someone more normal. Maya listened patiently, her hand eventually finding its way into mine. "I don't want the normal version of you, Alex," she said, her eyes searching mine. "I want all of you, even the cringy sequined parts." And so, my life found a new, stranger equilibrium. My relationship with Maya, forged in the fires of my ridiculous secret, became stronger, more honest. And my friendship with Clara, a woman I had once loved, settled into a comfortable, supportive camaraderie. The story should, by all rights, end there. But life, as I've learned, is rarely so neat. A few weeks later, I came home to find Maya and Clara in my living room, the Nationals 2008 DVD playing on the television. They were attempting to replicate one of my more elaborate dance moves, a chaotic and hilarious mess of flailing limbs and suppressed giggles. "Come on, Torpedo," Maya said, a mischievous grin on her face. "Show us how it's done." And in that moment, with the two most important women in my life looking at me with a mixture of affection and amusement, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I took a deep breath, struck a ridiculously dramatic pose, and for the first time in over a decade, I danced. The streams had finally crossed, and I was, at last, whole.